Hello, this is Patient X Files, where the rare becomes real. His skin turned stone. I never believed in curses until I watched my husband's body betray him, one cell at a time, until I felt his skin turn from silk to marble under my fingertips, until I realized that sometimes the most terrifying prisons aren't made of bars. They're made of your own flesh. Marcus was 34 when it started. A software engineer with hands that could dance across keyboards like a pianist, creating code that solved problems for millions of people. His fingers were his livelihood, his art, his connection to the world. They were beautiful hands, long, elegant, always warm when they held mine. The first sign was so subtle I almost missed it. A tiny patch of skin on his right index finger that felt different when I touched it. Harder, thicker, like a small callus but smoother. When I mentioned it, Marcus just shrugged and said he'd probably hit it against something at work, but calluses don't spread. Within 3 weeks, that small patch had grown. It crept across his finger like spilled wax, hardening everything it touched. The skin lost its natural give, its warmth, its humanity. When Marcus tried to bend his finger, it moved stiffly, reluctantly, as if the joint itself was fighting against him. "It's probably just dry skin," he said, but I could hear the uncertainty creeping into his voice. "Maybe I need to moisturize more." We tried everything. Expensive creams, home remedies, even some weird coconut oil treatment his sister swore by. Nothing worked. The hardness continued its relentless march across his hand, turning his fingers into something that belonged in a museum, not in my bed. The worst part wasn't the physical change. It was watching Marcus try to pretend everything was normal. He'd sit at his computer typing with increasing difficulty, his fingers moving like broken marionettes. The fluid grace was gone, replaced by mechanical forced movements that made every keystroke a battle. I found him crying in the bathroom one night, staring at his hands in the mirror. The hardened skin had spread to his palm by then, creating strange ridges and valleys across what used to be smooth flesh. It looked like marble veined with silver, beautiful in the most horrible way imaginable. "I can't feel them properly anymore," he whispered, his voice breaking. "It's like wearing thick gloves all the time, except I can never take them off." That's when we finally went to see Dr. Harrison. Dr. Harrison was the kind of physician who looked at you like you were a puzzle to be solved rather than a person to be healed. He examined Marcus's hands with clinical detachment, pressing and prodding the hardened skin with instruments that clicked and measured and quantified the horror we were living through. "Scleroderma," he said finally, the word dropping into the room like a stone into still water. "Systemic sclerosis. Your immune system is essentially attacking your connective tissue, causing it to produce too much collagen. The excess collagen hardens and thickens the skin." He said it so casually, like he was discussing the weather. But for us, it felt like he'd just announced the end of the world. "Is it treatable?" I asked, though I could already see the answer in his careful expression. "Manageable," he replied, which we quickly learned was medical speak for "we can slow it down, but we can't stop it." Marcus asked the question we were both afraid to voice: how far will it spread? Dr. Harrison pulled up images on his computer screen. Photos of other patients, other bodies transformed by this invisible enemy. Faces pulled tight like masks, arms locked in permanent bends, torsos encased in skin so rigid it looked like armor. "In some cases, it remains localized," he said. "In others," he didn't need to finish. The pictures spoke for themselves. That night, Marcus held me with hands that already felt foreign. The warmth was fading from his fingertips, replaced by an unnatural coolness that made my skin crawl. But I held on anyway because I knew that soon even holding might become impossible. The progression was cruel in its unpredictability. Some days the hardening seemed to pause, giving us false hope that maybe it had stopped. Maybe we'd caught it in time. But then Marcus would wake up to find the stone-like texture had crept further up his wrist or appeared in a new patch on his forearm. His face was the hardest part to watch. The skin around his mouth began to tighten, pulling his lips into a permanent half-smile that looked more like a grimace. Eating became difficult, then painful, then nearly impossible. The simple act of opening his mouth wide enough for a spoonful of soup became a daily struggle. "I look like a mannequin," he said one morning, touching his cheek with fingertips that could barely feel the contact. "Like someone carved me out of wax and forgot to make me human." But the physical changes were only part of the nightmare. What really broke my heart was watching Marcus disappear inside his own body. The man who used to gesture wildly when he told stories now sat with his hands folded carefully in his lap. The husband who once danced with me in the kitchen while dinner cooked now stood stiffly by the stove, afraid that any sudden movement might crack something. Work became impossible. How do you write code when your fingers can't feel the keys? How do you navigate a world built for soft, flexible humans when your body is turning into a statue? Marcus tried to adapt. He bought voice recognition software, learned new ways to interact with computers, even experimented with eye-tracking technology. But I could see the frustration building in him like pressure in a kettle. Every accommodation was a reminder of what he'd lost, what was being stolen from him day by day. The worst part came 6 months after diagnosis. Marcus woke up unable to move his jaw more than a few millimeters. The skin around his mouth had tightened overnight, creating a mask that trapped his words inside. He sat on the edge of the bed, tears streaming down cheeks that could no longer wrinkle with emotion, trying to speak through lips that barely parted. I called Dr. Harrison immediately, emergency appointment, urgent consultation. All the medical words that meant "please help us" were drowning. "This is a more aggressive progression than we initially expected," the doctor admitted, his clinical detachment finally cracking to reveal something almost human underneath. "We need to discuss more intensive treatment options." More intensive meant more experimental. Drugs with names I couldn't pronounce and side effects that read like horror stories. Immunosuppressants that might slow the hardening but could leave Marcus vulnerable to infections that would kill him faster than the Scleroderma ever could. "And what would you do?" I asked Dr. Harrison directly. "If this was your husband, your body, your life?" He was quiet for a long moment, looking at Marcus sitting rigidly in the examination chair. His hands folded like those of a praying statue. "I would fight," he said finally. "Even if the odds weren't good, even if the treatment was as dangerous as the disease. Because the alternative is watching yourself disappear." That night, Marcus made his decision. Not about treatment. We'd already decided to try the experimental therapy, but about something bigger, something that would define how he faced whatever time he had left. He couldn't speak well anymore, so he typed his thoughts on the tablet we'd bought for communication. His fingers moved slowly, painfully but with determination that reminded me of the man I'd fallen in love with. "I won't let this thing win by making me afraid to live," he wrote. "If my body is turning to stone, then I'll be the most beautiful statue anyone has ever seen." It sounds absurd, maybe even a little crazy. But That's exactly what Marcus did. He began documenting his transformation not with shame or self-pity, but with the eye of an artist studying his own metamorphosis. He took photographs of the changing textures of his skin, noting how the light played differently across hardened surfaces than it had across soft flesh. He started a blog called Marble Man, writing about the strange beauty he found in his condition. The way his hardened skin caught sunlight like polished stone, the intricate patterns that appeared as the scleroderma progressed, creating natural art across his body. The unexpected strength he discovered in accepting rather than fighting his physical transformation. People started following his journey. Other patients with autoimmune conditions, artists fascinated by the intersection of illness and beauty. Medical professionals who'd never seen scleroderma approached with such grace and curiosity rather than despair. Marcus couldn't smile anymore, not in the traditional sense. But somehow his writing conveyed a joy that transcended physical expression. He found ways to communicate love that didn't require flexible facial muscles. He developed a language of touch that worked even with fingers that could barely feel. The experimental treatment helped, slowing the progression enough to give us more time. Not a cure, but time. Time for Marcus to finish his blog project. Time for us to learn new ways of being married, new forms of intimacy that worked within the constraints of his changing body. Time for me to understand that love isn't about the flexibility of skin or the warmth of touch. It's about choosing to see beauty in whatever form your beloved takes, even when that form challenges everything you thought you knew about what it means to be human. Marcus lived for 3 more years after his diagnosis. The scleroderma never stopped completely, but it slowed enough that he was able to complete his digital art project, documenting not just his physical transformation, but the inner journey that accompanied it. He died not from the scleroderma itself, but from complications related to the treatment. His body, weakened by immune suppression, couldn't fight off a simple respiratory infection that would have been nothing to a healthy person. But here's what I want you to understand. Marcus didn't lose his battle with scleroderma. He transformed it into something else entirely. He took a disease that typically isolates people, that makes them afraid to be seen or touched, and turned it into a celebration of the human spirit's ability to find beauty in the most unexpected places. His blog is still online. Thousands of people have read his words, seen his photographs, learned from his example that physical transformation doesn't have to mean spiritual defeat. Medical students study his case not just for the clinical aspects, but for the psychological approach that helped him maintain dignity and purpose throughout his illness. I still miss the warm touch of his original hands. I miss the easy smile, the spontaneous hugs, all the casual intimacies that healthy bodies take for granted. But I also treasure the deeper connection we developed, the love that grew stronger as his body grew harder. Marcus taught me that stone can be beautiful, that transformation, even unwanted transformation, can become a form of art, that the human spirit is more flexible than any skin, more durable than any muscle, more precious than any perfectly functioning body. Scleroderma tried to imprison him in his own flesh. Instead, he found a freedom that most of us never discover. The freedom that comes from accepting yourself exactly as you are, even when as you are defies every expectation of what a person should be. The last thing he wrote in his blog was this: "My skin turned to stone, but my soul learned to fly." That seems like a fair trade. I think about those words every day, about the choice we all have when life transforms us in ways we never wanted or expected. We can rage against the change, fight it until we exhaust ourselves, let it consume us with bitterness and fear. Or we can do what Marcus did. We can find the beauty in our broken places, the strength in our limitations, the art in our imperfections. We can choose to see transformation not as loss, but as becoming something new, something rare, something precious, something that the world has never seen before and will never see again. Marcus's story isn't really about scleroderma. It's about the extraordinary capacity of ordinary people to find light in the darkest places, to create meaning from suffering, to turn even the most challenging physical realities into opportunities for grace. His skin turned to stone, but his spirit became luminous. And in the end, that's what mattered. That's what lasted. That's what continues to inspire everyone who hears his story to look at their own challenges, their own transformations, their own broken places, and ask, what beauty can I create from this? What art can I make from my pain? What light can I shine from within my darkness? These are the questions that turn patients into artists, victims into victors, endings into beginnings. These are the questions that make us human. If you enjoyed this video, please support the channel, like, share, and subscribe.